We've been doing several videos on family business and some of the issues that we run across as we're building strategic plans for family business. And this is an issue we run into quite a bit, so we're going to cover it. And you could call it the money tree issue, but I think everybody has a memory of their father at some point or another saying, money doesn't grow on trees, or I can't just go back in the yard and pull the leaves off the money tree to go pay for this thing that you want. And what we find in small businesses is there is a tendency to see the business as the money tree by both sides, by the parents and by the next generation that's coming up. And traditionally, if you don't have a proactive or intentional way to address that through a process like strategic planning that we do with clients or some other kind of intentional business planning method, this is some of the stuff, these are the issues we see when you're not deliberate and intentional about this. Number one is jobs for everybody. We find that not only the kids work there, but the kids work there, and the cousins and the nieces and the nephews work there, and kids coming home from college on summer break work there. And they might do filing, or they might do something in the warehouse. Oftentimes, we see them hanging out in the office. Maybe they're answering phones, but it's not uncommon to see them kind of unproductive, right? And it's just a sense of if you don't have anything else to do and you need a paycheck, then come on in. And what that leads to, we don't have compensation for these folks. We basically have an allowance because they're still dependents. And the age doesn't really matter. We can see teenagers in between semesters in college or high school doing this. We can see 30 and 40-year-old kids who basically don't have a ton of responsibility. Maybe they have a ton of capability, but they're waiting in the wings while mom and dad deal with one of those previous issues we talked about, which is, when are they going to be able to let go? And even in cases where they are performing active services in the business, they're not necessarily being compensated at market rates because mom and dad are like, well, it takes $100,000 a year for them to support their family, and so that's what we're going to pay them, even though a comparable position in the market might only be $60,000 or $65,000. And there's a whole lot of issues with that, not the least of which is that everybody else in the company is looking at that $60,000 position, and whether or not you think they do, they know what they're getting paid, and it's causing a lot of issues down the org chart in terms of culture and that kind of stuff. So we don't want to engage in dependence at the business. We really want people to be fairly compensated. But the other side, and this kind of goes hand in glove with that previous issue, is a lot of times they're in a position based on what they're good at, not necessarily what the business needs. So we see this a lot in very small companies that are maybe $2 million, $3 million businesses, and they've got the son or their grandson is the full-time IT person because they're great at computers. Well, no $1 to $2 million business that we normally run into has a full-time IT person. It's just not a necessity. It's something that we're much better off paying for as we need it with an outside contractor. You see businesses and they've got the full-time social media person. Well, it happens to be a relative of the owner. And it's not that the business needs a full-time social media person, certainly not at $35,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 a year, but they're really good at it, and so that's the job that they got. We've seen in large businesses, $15, $20 million, we've seen a family member who's really good at design work, and so the business starts this whole other branch or this whole other division that's design heavy when everything prior to that was more production heavy or engineering heavy. Now they want to get into this new area because it's what somebody's good at, but the market's not pulling them this direction. They're trying to basically put somebody in the family to work and make the business around them. And it almost never works out, right? So that's the haphazard kind of unintentional way to address it. What we think that they're missing in terms of opportunities, if they just do some strategic planning and they would be more intentional about how they onboard these people, number one, the business's needs and the timing of meeting those needs could be synced up. If we do a strategic plan for a business and we're charting a certain trajectory for growth and we're executing against it and we're relatively certain that's where we're going to be, we can take somebody who's a sophomore in college and say, listen, when you get out, this is where the business is going to be and this is what we're going to need. And yeah, maybe you do come in and do some internships or something, but what we're telling you is that you need to consistently be building toward the skill set that's going to be required for this position, because we're going to need to plug you in right here. That can also happen if the business isn't of a size right now where it can employ that person who maybe's got a great skill set. And you say, listen, we want you to continue to develop the skill set. We're not in a place where we can put it to full use right now, but go find a job somewhere else, learn on their dime, learn best practices from their business, and then at this point, and maybe we have a good idea when that's going to be, maybe we don't, but we have a place for you as soon as we're ready for your capability. We don't want that time to be wasted. One of the worst things you can do is put somebody to work in a business that doesn't have the opportunities available for them to fully develop the skill set. So the needs and understanding the timing of those needs really allows you to take that second generation and enable them to do a lot more than if you just take them into the business wholesale right away and say, well, we don't quite need you yet, but we'll find something productive for you to do. Here's a hint. If that's your attitude, they're almost never productive, at least not fully so. So let somebody else worry about making them productive. You bring them in the business when the business can fully use their capability. Outside experience, we talked a little bit about. If you bring, we see this especially with kids coming out of college, if you bring those kids in straight out of college into your business, I personally don't think you're doing them a lot of favors. You deprive them and the business of the outside experience they would be able to get, and having to being able to come into your business with a body of knowledge that isn't yours, being exposed to some thinking and some cultures that aren't yours, is going to be better for the business and better for them. So I'm a big fan on kids kind of taking a hiatus from working. Maybe they work there in high school, they go to college. Let them go somewhere else for a few years and then come into the business, because that leads to the next point. If they have that experience from a third party that doesn't owe them anything, they're not related to the owners, they don't feel like they're pulling any special favors, my experience is they're going to have a lot more confidence coming into your business. They're going to be a lot more sure of themselves. They're going to have less insecurity that's going to drive a lot of these petty, butting heads that we see with fathers and sons especially. A lot of it's just driven by the insecurity of that younger generation wanting to prove themselves because they haven't had to prove themselves. And this is the place where they have to. They all have to do it, and if they have to do it inside your four walls, expect that there's going to be some butting heads. But if they can come in with a lot of self-confidence and security, it also breeds a lot of humility, and they'll be able to lead better, not having that entitlement air about them, or maybe they don't have the entitled air, but if they come in right out of college, a lot of times they're going to be perceived to have the entitlement air by the people that they're working with, and that's just as dangerous. It's just as debilitating for their personal leadership. And then the last one is accountability. I think this is probably the undersold one in terms of practical benefits of taking your time and being intentional about bringing kids into the business. If this is going to be the leadership coming into the next iteration, the next generation of business ownership, you want to teach them that you're accountable too. Just because you're the business owner as the parent, and just because it was your creation, doesn't mean you get to do whatever you want to with it. You're a steward of that business. And by doing some planning and identifying when the business is going to need them and where their talents are going to be put to best use and maybe what they should be doing in the meantime, you're teaching them that you're accountable. You're a steward of this business. And you're going to build a plan, and you're going to agree to hold yourself accountable to that plan. You don't just get to go pick money off the tree and use it however you want, whenever you want, because your name is on the ownership line. So I hope that's helpful. The money tree kind of disease that runs rampant in a lot of small family business is one of the ones that we're trying to head off, and we do it just through sound planning and then making everybody, kids and parents, accountable to the plan.